Happy New Year. Happy 2026. And now to welcome us to the new year. The universe is just making things way too easy right now. As on New Year's Day and welcoming us into 2026, when it comes to Drake, we found out that he is not just getting sued again, but while his lyrics have come to life as he got hit with the RICO and Aiden Ross, academics, and some others are getting hit alongside him as well. And now before we go any further into this, well, if you're ready to see how the Drake RICO is one of the worst things that we have seen, honestly, in the entire streaming era of music, well, because this is Drake, be sure to smile, leave a like, sit back, and relax or stand up and jump around and do your thing. Because with the paperwork that Drake has been handed and with what they are exposing, well, this isn't just a one-off thing or an isolated escapade that is accusing Drake of one thing only. But with this suit being a federal RICO case, well, it's absolutely terrible for the people involved as it's connecting a pipeline of atrocities to showcase how with the so-called most streamed rapper and the guy who runs up the numbers supposedly, well, if he's still thinking about dropping that Iceman album, he really should rename it to the Botman album. Because with what we are finding out about how fraudulent everything Drake has ever done may be, well, ultimately, when you see how Drake working with Stake has been a pyramid scheme to inflate his streaming catalog. And yes, that is what this RICO is over. And that's really only scratching the surface. Well, when you just look into this, you are going to see how with every single claim about bots playing the system being an industry plant and everything else in between that Drake and his people have tried to say about Kendrick Lamar, well, it's all just been an absolute deflection and a reflection of their own guilt and their own strategies to just manipulate the system for as long as they did. Which on that note, let's not waste any more time and let's jump into what this thing is exactly saying. Which just to preface this, if this is what's happening for Drake on day 1 of 2026, how bad are things going to look on day 365? As right now for the Cupcake Karen, this may genuinely be the worst music lawsuit of all time, and we are just going to dive into every single important detail, which was all best said by sports and sports gambling attorney Daniel Wallish, who well reported this. The last gambling lawsuit of 2025 is a doozy. A federal RICO class action versus Stake and rapper Drake for promoting an illegal online gambling site under the guise of a fake sweepstakes. Drake is accused of using the platform to artificially inflate play counts of his music. Drake Ross and the third guy named here is the guy who runs pages like Academics TV have also made use of Stake to directly transfer money between and among themselves using Stake's tipping program, which is an unlimited and wholly unregulated money transmitter that appears to exist outside the oversight of any financial regulator. Through Stake's tipping function, defendants have financed their combined artificial streaming to create fraudulent streams of Drake's music, fabricate popularity, disparage competitors and music label executives, and distort recommendation algorithms. And don't worry, it gets worse. As it says at the heart of the scheme, Drake acting directly and through willing and knowledgeable co-conspirators has deployed automated bots and streaming farms to artificially inflate play counts of his music across major platforms such as Spotify. So, when Drake just called out Spotify for being Spotify a few weeks ago, just remember the personal touch that came with. And then what it goes on to say is that these inauthentic streams injected via interstate digital pathways were calibrated to mislead royalty and recommendation engines, manufacture popularity, distort playlists and charts, and divert both value and audience attention. In tandem, this manipulation has suppressed authentic artists and narrowed consumers' access to legitimate content by undermining the integrity of curated experiences. And then as this Stakes user-to-user tipping and encrypted internal transfer mechanisms have fueled and enabled payments to bot operators and amplifiers to be hidden from public or regulatory view. And then they get into some specifics, as it says one example of a publicly documented large value tip is a $100,000 tipping transfer between defendants Drake and Aiden Ross in 2023. Days before the filing of this complaint, defendant Drake gave defendant Ross a $220,000 car as a gift. These tips and many others like them cycled among defendants Drake, Ross, and Academics TV were underwriting, botting, and paid engagement campaigns. And then one of the final points that is major is that Stake's platform design which mass counterparties and camouflages withdrawals as generic transactions. Well, it's ultimately just allowed for them to continue to exploit these illicit ways of doing business and just frauding every single person but their lame old circle. And now with this, out of all of the music lawsuits we have ever seen, and specifically with that an artist, what they are actually doing to impact the industry at large. If this is real, this is genuinely the worst thing I've ever seen. And honestly, one of the worst things I've seen in the entertainment business, arguably in decades. As just to talk about Drake for a second, out of all the lawsuits that have been released and put out about him, this is by far the worst. Because pretty much what we are seeing happen here is now that all the worst actions and things he has ever done and been accused of on paper are all coming together now on the highest level we have seen in paperwork in a whole RICO and are claiming that everything Drake has been doing with Stake and as a rapper has been working in unison, pretty much in a pyramid scheme. You could say that's all trying to defraud people, the record labels, streaming platforms, and so many other parties by just skewing every single thing possible. And really, if we look in the streaming era, while there's always been issues, we've seen artists get exposed faking things. We've even seen the companies and partners do this as, well, there has never been anything this wide scale, this elaborate, and this thought out. And the potential consequences of this all have never looked more terrible. Because if we break this thing down for a second and just look at the potential implications of the biggest and most streamed artists in the world literally committing fraud can have industry-wide. Well, again is what we are seeing now is that Stake and the company that they have set up and then the voices they have used to build up the company which are Drake, Aiden Ross, DJ Academics' platforms and puppets, which on that note, it's so funny that this guy who runs Academics TV who goes by this whole Grand Lossa name and Drake loves him. Well, as the lawsuit says, he's literally been hiding out in Australia this whole time, cosplaying as a rap fan and somebody from the culture and is causing all of this division while having no place in any of this at all. Well, overall now, what this lawsuit is showing and racking down on is not just that Stake has used the voices of Drake, Aiden, and Academics to project and push their horrible service onto so many people in the most deceptive way possible. But now in addition to lying to the people, Drake, Aiden, and the rest of the partners have been working together to pretty much clean up Drake's books and pockets, wipe money away from his name, put it into streaming companies to inflate numbers, and then with that money that's being fraud increases payout to do it all over again and fraud more people and continue to cheat the system. And really, when you look at this is straight up fraud. And not just at the expense of his own business partners, but at the expense of fans and other artists who are trying to find ways to build sustainable music careers where they all have to share revenue that they are earning. And on that note, for the people who get mad that we're still talking about Drake in 2026 with stuff like this is why it's not stopping, and this is why it's never going to stop, because I can't let this slide, because this is actively deterring and moving people away from even trying to make music or want to explore the culture at all. And when we talk about hip-hop stagnating and even the compound effects of what caused that, which a lot of it is rappers pushing away from music, because they weren't making enough or gaining enough, and well, they just became bored and did other things, which is having less people come into rap or want to try to actually make music than ever. Well, you know, when one guy is running up the numbers and is the most streamed artist in the world and it's not close, and for reference, all of the artists with these streaming platforms have to split up the revenue based on who was streamed the most, and then everybody gets a cut of the total win. Drake is making all this money because he's literally committing fraud, and most artists can't make a thing. When you look at it like that, it's no surprise why a lot of music has stagnated the way it has. And now with that said, when we just look further into the musical sin that we are seeing here, and honestly just one of the worst business practices I have ever seen as well, which on that note, for all the people who keep trying to say that Drake isn't having financial issues, Drake is a billionaire and all these other lies about him just stop, because no competent billionaire in rap and in the entertainment space would ever do something this dumb. Well, overall, when you look at how Drake is using this gambling company to commit fraud in every sense of the word, you do have to wonder when it comes to the whole conversation we've been having about the value of Drake's catalog, what he received from his label, what his wife, and everything there. It's like that scene in The Sopranos where Tony has to ask, is any of this even real? Because when we just think about all of the conflict that Drake has had with his label and the seeming disconnect that started over trying to re-up his contract and get more money than the last bag he got, which was supposedly $400 million. Well, when you just see the games Drake has been willing to play and you see the way he has tried to trick the system, which we are just never seeing within a more grand and poignant and direct way right here, you start to ask yourself, did Drake get that $400 million because he was frauding the system back then? And then you start to question, has Drake been gaslighting his label into thinking that is worth, let's just say, $800 million now? Meanwhile, the numbers and metrics that his team are using to try and get what they want and convince people that he really is worth what he is trying to demand, well, is all just coming from numbers that literally have been made and detained by committing fraud. And again, when you think about that, and then even think about the Not Like Us lawsuit in of itself, and think about every single thing that Drake tried to say that Kendrick Lamar was doing, and specifically within that all the practices around the bots and the manipulated streams and the games that were playing and getting pulled there, you have to ask with that lawsuit. And I said this when it came out just off of the idea that it seemed like it kind of made sense. But really looking at this lawsuit, it makes all the sense. Well, for Drake to say the things he did and almost for him to see somebody become more successful than he was, it almost is showing that Drake only believes somebody can outdo them when they are committing fraud, because that's how much fraud and that's how many bots he is using to inflate his stuff. Which really just shows how far gone this guy is and how there's nothing in him that's even slightly focused on the music or creating good stuff, and it's just about putting out whatever slop you can. And well, then all the time and resources in the Drake camp are just figuring out more and more ways to commit this large-scale fraud where genuinely some of the most insane stuff is happening. And even when you think about something like the success of Doi and the way Aiden Ross has been one of the most vocal proponents of her success, and people trying to smear her as an industry plant again with the success she has had and the rise she has had, is Aiden Ross accusing it on artificial things, just a product of him gaining and being a part of this system where they are running a glorified pyramid scheme on all of their partners. Well, overall, I don't have all the answers to this because we don't know how deep this goes. And honestly, based on what they have revealed now and just seeing the way the lawsuits have continued to evolve over the past few months, it would seem foolish to think that this is going to stop here and that the rabbit hole doesn't go deeper. But on that note, we can see that these guys are really in massive trouble. And if even half of this is true, it's going to completely change the entire music industry. And I think for the label system, it's going to put things in absolute chaos, because let's just say in the film industry, for example, if a company like Disney found out that the highest grossing films that they own of all time, and let's just say the James Cameron Avatar films, and well, let's just say some of the Avengers films, well, their box office gross was artificially inflated to have a standard now where the guy who leads the numbers. And again, to put this in music, it would be Drake as the most streamed artist in the game. Well, as now your top guy who is earning the most money is literally frauding business partners to get more money, which ultimately, when you understand where those numbers are coming from, is not actually worth what he is being paid for. You see the issue this creates, and you see the confusion this creates for every single party, because really, and this seems why Drake has used stake the way he has, and this is why they've been such great partners, which is just because they have allowed Drake to just get away with this garbage BS fraud slop, and they have allowed for him to just be the worst person in the entire entertainment world, just in terms of really frauding to this scale, which we have just not seen anything like in this era of music at all. And I mean, seriously, from the label's end, if you see this and this turns out to be any bit true, honestly, may destroy whatever is left of the music industry. It really just put things in a place where I don't know if they could ever be fixed. Because let's just say if you're UMG and you find out that the guy who is the most paid person on your payroll has literally been getting the paycheck that he has because he is frauding your own system and misleading everybody. They need to investigate every single artist on their roster, see if what they are doing is legit. And then they got to make a lot of tough decisions, which let's just say if this turns out to be fully true for Drake, this precedent of artists even being able to do this or artists even trying to do it, even if it's only him, it's going to make artists forever be paid less from labels and streamers because it's going to give them less leverage, less bargaining power. It's going to make them have less trust in them in terms of just having a business relationship, which means that the artists are losing. And the only person who's going to suffer from this is every other musician, past, present, and current, and their work and what it is valued by in an industry that's biggest struggle has been trying to properly value the art being produced. And when you look at this entire thing from that perspective, you do see the dangers of this at large for the entire music industry, which just makes me say, as funny as it is that this is happening to Drake, because it's been obvious to people who have been paying attention that his success has been fraudulent and that the numbers he is running up are just not legit. For the music industry, if they find out that the guy that they gave the most money has been frauding them this whole time, it's really going to ruin things forever, where I don't know if there really is going to be an industry after that and if the system will ever work in the same way. Which just makes you say, well, this is absolutely hilarious that this is happening to Drake, and it's honestly deserved because of the games he has played. It is a little scary for the artists who have been getting duped by this for years and who are only going to get duped more for the future. Implications that this will all hold. But on that very note, for an industry that decided to prioritize numbers, trends, and analytics over any sort of merit, cultural impact, and just things that actually quantify that people are resonating with art, well, overall, this is how creative businesses fail, and this is how their downfalls happen. And both for Drake and the label system, you decided to play this game, and you're now facing the consequences of it. But what I will say with all of that out of the way is that if this is how bad it looks for Drake on day 1 of 2026, I don't even think we want to know how bad it's going to look on day 365. So now with all that said, let me know, what do you think about this Drake lawsuit? What do you think about his full implications? What do you think this really is all going to amount to? And what do you think is going to happen from here? If you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I hope you have a great new year. I hope you have a great weekend, a great day, and I hope you continue to hang out with me because listen, if you want to see how this fight between real and fake continues in hip-hop, in music, and in entertainment, and well, with what Doechii just did in her new song, she addressed this head-on and maybe made one of the most important topical pieces we will see to this struggle down the line going on throughout this entire year. You're not going to want to miss this one, so check out the suggested video.